Mobutu Sese Seko Kukubendu Wazabanga. I'm going to tell you shortly what that name is. In the early 70s, Zaire's then president, Zaire is the present-day Democratic Republic of Congo, the then president of Zaire, Joseph Desire Mobutu, decided that he was going to institute a nationwide policy that he called Authenticité. This policy was all about the country reclaiming the African culture. And as part of that policy, Zaire then shed off colonial names and colonial cultures. So he stopped being Joseph Desire Mobutu. He became Mobutu Sese Seko Kukubendu Wazabanga, which means the all-powerful warrior who, because of his endurance and inflexible will to win, goes from conquest to conquest, leaving fire in his trail. Yep, that's what it meant. And that was Mobutu for you. Unfortunately, this win that he sought never translated to the ordinary Congolese people. But that is something that we're going to be addressing in the coming days. Today, we need to just ask this question: what does it mean to be authentically African? For Mobutu, the answer was that the answer lay in him changing his own attire. He started wearing that silken scarf around his neck. He changed his names. And he kept insisting that it was really critical for the people to reclaim cultures that were African. Mobutu wasn't the first African president to go down this route. About 10 years earlier, more than 10 years earlier, in the early 1960s, two African presidents also had similar policy initiatives. There was Chad's first president, Francois Tombalbaye. The guy came up with what he called Tchaditude. This was a state-led cultural revolution that sought to restore African culture amongst the people. But he had vested interests. For him, African culture seemed to mean the Sara community's culture. He was from the Sara community, which is from southern Chad. He also gave up his first name, Francois, and then adopted another name, Ngarta. So he became Ngarta Tombalbaye. The newly minted Ngarta Tombalbaye then required the people of Chad to undergo the Yondo ritual, which is a ritual from the Sara community that entailed scouring, simulating burial, flogging. It had its meanings. It had its deeper meanings at a cultural level. But it ended up simply breeding more division because the people who are not from the Sara community did not like that at all. They said, that's not our culture. That's your culture. We have ours. The other president at about this time, who also came up with a cultural renaissance policy framework for the country, was Senegal's first president, Leopold Senghor, who co-founded what is known as Négritude. This was an intellectual and literal movement that celebrated Black identity, that celebrated Black culture. But unlike Mobutu's Authenticité or Tombalbaye's Tchaditude, Négritude was rooted in philosophy, in poetry, in art. And it also didn't seek to force given cultures on the people. However, Négritude also sought to place this Black identity within a civilization of the universal. Now, the reason I've mentioned these three different approaches towards African authenticity is because in today's Africa, we actually need to have that conversation. What does being authentically African mean to you? What does being authentically African entail? Of course, there are many answers to that question, but is it possible to begin a process of harmonizing all this? Is it possible to begin that process of ensuring that we truly reconnect with our roots? We truly reconnect with those different layers of what being authentically African means. What does this mean to you? Let's talk about this. Remember what Marcus Garvey said: a people without knowledge of their history, origin, and culture are like a tree without roots. And you know what happens to a tree without roots? It simply collapses.